Thank you all so much for joining me for this episode of Ascend the Matrix podcast. I'm your host, Chrys King, creator of medicinealchemist.com and ascended-astrology.com. I am also the creator of chrisking.com, where I help mystics, lightworkers, ascended CEOs become new earth leaders and create businesses and tap out of the matrix and into their most highest divine self. And again, I'm welcoming Jen Fields for part 2 of an incredible conversation that we've been having. And I knew this was going to have to be split into 2 parts. So if you all have not already checked out part 1, please go ahead and do that now. And we talk about so many things in part 1: twin flames, grief, loss. I'm not going to ruin anything for people who haven't seen part 1 yet, but if you are a hopeless romantic and a light worker, you definitely need to pay attention to part 1. Jen Fields, welcome. Jen is a sacred sexuality guide, Akashic Channel, shamanic healer, and author. Her work explores Eros, which is Eros, as a path to spiritual awakening and divine remembrance. She weaves together erotic mysticism, tantra-based ritual, and the healing power of grief, which she has embodied and mastered so well, even if sometimes you may feel like you haven't, because who can possibly actually master grief without feeling like it's taking you down? But through her writing, her shamanic ceremonies, her one-to-one offerings, she helps others reclaim their sensual aliveness and connect to the sacred pulse within them. She is also the author of an incredible book that I am featured in called Melody of Fire, a story of spirituality, sexuality, and surrender, a true story, that is. And everyone should go ahead and get this book now. It's an incredible book. It's like Twilight meets Abraham meets Twin Flames meets 50 Shades of Grey. I mean, it literally covers all the bases. If you are someone who is interested in, anything to do with union and heart and sex and the power of that and the sacred act of coming together, no pun intended, I highly recommend you. It's also got a little bit of Ghost in there, okay, with Patrick Swayze and Whoopi, and we're going to talk about that today. So, Jen, introduce yourself to the audience that does not know you.
Hi. Thank you, first of all, for having me here again. Yeah, I am an Akashic Channel and a shamanic practitioner, and those used to show up in two different ways, but it's kind of like woven together now. And so I do a lot of shamanic work that is sort of the information is coming from the Akashic records, and it's a blending of upper and lower realm and sometimes middle realm work with Akashic information. I also do, as you mentioned in the intro, work with Eros and with sacred sexuality and with a lot of healing and releasing and surrender, and also grief support as well.
Yeah, beautiful. And we'll put your information and people will be able to find you in the show notes below. But just to recap for everyone listening, this is a segue right out of our first conversation. And so if you haven't already checked out part 1, of our interview, please go ahead and do that, because there's a lot of context that may be missing in this conversation. But even if you don't, we're about to get into some more taboo topics, some triggering topics, especially to, those light workers with a stick up their butt. So we're really going to open the space here and open our hearts to this conversation, because it's going to go deeper, pun intended that time. No, not that one. No, not that one. Not that one. Nope. There. Okay, I'll remember. I don't have them labeled yet. Okay, I'm like a bad DJ over here. So
That journey was actually more fun. I'm glad that we
yes, that definitely took me down a rabbit hole. Okay, like it put me into a hypnosis. So, our last conversation, we went through how you got to this point, your shamanic initiation, even in childhood, from being a queer person, being married to a woman, and coming from such a religious background to having a meeting with a psychic. And that's why I tell everyone, go to a really good psychic, they'll change your life.
Mhm.
That told you all these things that you couldn't possibly fathom at the time, and then it all came true, and then it all came crumbling down. And we're right now still in the crumble point in our conversation, but we really touched on when we met, you and I,
Mhm.
and at a medicine retreat about 4.5 years ago. And this chance encounter, this synchronistic experience that we had together that reactivated your connection with this twin flame that you have. So, for those listening
Mhm.
who didn't listen to part one, you're going to be confused a little bit, but let's start from there. So, we were at the retreat, you worked with the medicine, you heard him for the
Mhm.
first time again in a long
Mhm.
time because again you had to go through your dark night of the soul, and there was a part of you that needed to feel the loneliness and the emptiness of the opposite of who you actually are,
Mhm.
to desire what you actually are again. And now that you came fully into that desire again, and you heard him again, and you opened up in the medicine way, because some people come and work with medicine and it's just to heal themselves. Other people are called to medicine because they are medicine practitioners.
Mhm.
So it feels like you had a shamanic initiation at your around your experience in meeting with me, around your experience with your twin flame Jay, that which is listed and talked completely about in the book. Here he is, okay, and he's like, I'm not that dark.
Yeah.
Um, he is here with us in conversation right now. So let's start with what you were seeing, right? As
Mhm.
we left off in the last conversation, there were some dark things that you were seeing, because as we open our third eye and we open our shamanic channels as gatekeepers between realms and as masters of duality, we then now begin to see what is actually there beyond the veils, and it isn't fairies, rainbows, and spirit guides always.
Right. Yes. We talked a little bit in the first episode about my lack of knowledge because of my isolation in the area that I'm at in the country. It's just really religious, and by religious I mean like Christian, like Southern Baptist religious. So I didn't have good resources. I didn't have people to talk to about any of this, so I felt like I was fumbling around pretty hard, up until the point that of the retreat where I met you and I got to hear Jay again. But it was kind of difficult because my only guidance that I could get was coming from Jay, and I wasn't sure if I could trust it because I was seeing just terrifying things, like terrifying images. The night after I got back from retreat, um, my grandmother came through to me, and for the
On
first
your
time
mother's side,
on my mother's
I
side.
feel her now.
Yes, and that wasn't scary, but what she said alarmed me. She said that I didn't really understand the door that I had opened,
Yeah.
and that there would be times that I was going to be really afraid, and that she wanted me to ask for her or ask for Jay, and they would talk me through.
Yeah.
Um, but that night when I laid down to go to bed, it was like a slideshow of horrific, like half demon, half
Yeah.
just like grotesque. I remember just laying in my bed and just shaking. And I was asking Jay, I was like, what is that? Like, I don't know if I want to do this, like make it stop. And he was talking me through, and told me that I was just lit up like a Christmas tree because I was really like in the spirit realm, and that it was attracting all of this, to me, and to
Yeah.
not give it any attention, and they would go away.
Yeah.
And it eased over time, but I still would walk into a room and see like a dark entity.
Yeah.
And it brought a lot of anxiety at first, and then I would ask Jay, like, what is this, and like, how do I navigate this? And what he told me was always right. It would make it move through. But I remember being really scared and not knowing if I could even trust him, because I didn't know, like, what is this? Where am I? Who are these people? And what can I trust? What's real?
Yeah.
Because it was just so much that I didn't know, that was on the other side of that. Which now I'm very comfortable in the spirit realm, and no matter like what shows up, like I'm confident enough in my gifts to, if I don't know how to navigate it, I know who to ask and who to trust.
Yeah.
So that's evolved quite a bit over the last 4 years.
If you can hear me right now, you are frozen
I didn't
and
know
the
that.
connection is breaking up. And so he's doing it again. Um, and and honestly, I don't know if you've been paying attention, but he's talking to me a lot right now, and I'm having a hard time staying between what's happening over here in our conversation. So I just want to give a voice to it real quick. I couldn't tell who it was coming
Sure.
from because when I tuned to your mother's energy, it happened at the same time. But do you connect with a rose or a rose being handed to you? Um, what does that mean?
I didn't know they were going to go there today, but I guess we can.
I'm sorry,
Um,
the connection broke up and I told him let's do this later and then the connection started breaking up and I was like, "Dear God," because also he keeps singing the song Tale as old as time.
oh, that's really beautiful, and appropriate. So recently, it's come into my awareness. And I've been working with the energy of Mary Magdalene quite a bit.
Oh,
But and in my mind, the reason for all of this, was the twin flame journey, and it was to learn, my wholeness and to work through separation. And but it's really a lineage of women priestesses who work through grief, resurrection,
yes.
and union.
Yeah.
So like Isis and Osiris, Mary Magdalene and Yeshua,
Yeah.
and so it's the same. It is the tale as old as time, right? It's the same like
Oh, I see.
initiatory. Yeah, it's the initiatory
Beauty and the
process.
Beast. He
Uh-huh.
also looks at himself as the Beast, just
Of
so you
course he does. Of course he does.
know. He
The
is very
listeners don't know, but
flirty.
he's a Leo, and he is a Leo.
Yes, yes, he
He
is.
likes the attention, and he's really funny. So I'm glad he's like doing that. But that's cute. That's really cute.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really. I didn't know. Like I said, I didn't know they were going to go there, but really, this path to my priestesshood was also always going to happen.
Yeah.
And losing him in the physical was an initiatory rite. Like it was
Yes.
the grief medicine, the resurrection by,
Yes.
bringing him back into my awareness through my opening,
Yeah.
and then the union energy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. There's so much happening over here as well. And I don't know if you're familiar with Ophiuchus in ascended astrology, but it's the 13th sign that
Okay.
comes after Scorpio, in between Scorpio and Sagittarius. And it's the sign of resurrection. And it's the serpent bearer. So it's a priestess shamanic energy. It's the zodiac sign that rules or is ruled by Chiron.
Okay.
And there's a lot of Ophiuchus energy coming up right now. And so if you have placements in Sagittarius and Scorpio, it's possible that you actually have Ophiuchus placements in the ascended matrix zodiac. So something's coming in about that as well and reclaiming that and there being a remembrance coming in around that. And he is just so vibrant right now. So I am trying to stay here with you, but I also haven't eaten anything dense yet today. So I'm just super open. So bear with me, you all. Thank you for your patience with us. But and Prince is also here, and I think there's
Okay.
just a very strong connection that Prince has with eroticism. I mean, he has a song called "Erotic City" and music and sexuality, and he has a song called "Sexuality." So there's a really strong spiritual group that is joining us for this next segment of the conversation. Now, where we're at in your journey is, of course, you're seeing things that the average light worker, because they don't identify with being a shadow worker, they
Mhm.
don't see because it's not part of their contract or they're not, shamanically initiated or that's just not part of their path. They're
Mhm.
meant to be fairies or, Arcturian princesses and or you know, yoni egg divine goddesses, and it's never supposed to go into the darker realms. Well, some of us are
Mhm.
meant to go there to retrieve soul pieces and to retrieve others. But
Mhm.
where where did that lead you from that point forward? So Jay's now back in your life as a spiritual entity and a guide.
Mm-hmm.
Your eye is
Mm-hmm.
open. Take us from
Yes.
there.
Um, so there was a period of time, I wanted to say at the beginning, and I lost it. Sorry. That the reason, the big reason why I couldn't connect with him in the year that after he passed, he explained to me that grief is such a low vibration,
Ah,
and if grief is here and spirit is here, he had to get me to a medicine ceremony to get me up high
yeah,
enough so that I could hear him again.
yeah, yeah,
And so when all this stuff started coming online a little bit, and I got scared, it dropped me back down a little bit, and I couldn't hear Jay as clearly as I did when we first like reconnected. But he started asking me for a redo of our last night together. Like, and I kept getting it in little fragments. And he asked me to ask you, Chrys, to come and channel. He wanted to come through you because he said what he needed to say. He didn't want me to look back in doubt, because I was still really in the phase of like, did I hear that? Am I crazy? Did I just make that up? Like, how much of this is real? How much of this is me? And especially when my vibration dropped again out of fear, and I was just getting like, fragments. I just wasn't sure how much I could like trust about it. So I reached out to you to ask if you would be willing to come to a cabin that's on my parents' property, and channel Jay. And I sat with that for a long time before I wrote you, because it felt like the biggest ask, because
yeah,
it like you really have to trust the spirit coming through you to do that. And I even knew that at that time, and I just wasn't sure how you would feel about it. And it because it just felt really big and almost intrusive.
yeah.
I didn't want to, but he kept pushing, and so I finally did. And then you and I spoke, and you agreed to come down. But I'm really curious as to what was going on your end during that time.
Well, that was the first time I had, when I went through Kundalini Awakening, the book that I had my bookmark in as I started to go through that was called Opening to Channel. And I always wanted to channel because I wanted, I remember wanting to be Teresa Caputo and Lisa Williams and John Edwards when I was a teenager and a little kid. I wanted to be a medium. And then
Mhm.
I became a medium, but even before I realized I was a medium. But
Right.
before I even really stepped into that, I was really into Bashar and Abraham Hicks and Cryon and other channeled teachings, Lee Harris and the Z's and all
Mhm.
of it. And I really wanted to be able to trans channel, but it was very much an egoic. Even being a medium, I wanted to be the one who had the ability. Although I think the egoic desire was there because it was part of the soul mission, and that was
Yeah.
just the pathway in.
Right.
Is to get the ego to like, ooh, aren't you going to be the cool one at the party if you can tell everyone about their granny? Which I did. Okay, I did all
Hmm.
that, and I thought I was so cool. And then after you do it so many times, you're like, this is just who I am, and I can let go of this egoic identification around it. And so by the time you got to me, I had already let go, especially because of Kundalini Awakening, of a lot of the desire for fame that had been there and is in my astrological chart when I was a
Mhm.
child, and the desire for attention. I have a Leo stellium in the false matrix zodiac, and I had this strong desire to want to channel because I thought that would make people look at me a certain way or see me a certain way that was more elevated or took me more seriously. If I was able to totally leave and let something take over my body, that's even a higher form of mediumship when
Right.
it isn't always. So, there's layers to that. But by the time you got to me, I was just thinking. I remember being nervous. I do
Mhm.
remember, having done that before in slight ways, especially with medicine or psilocybin mushrooms. But I have a tendency to not surrender fully. Okay. So, and because I am an ego manifester in human design, in regular human design,
Mhm.
and having such a strong ego, whether that be positive or negative, I have a tendency to not want to not be me. So medicines like bufo, ayahuasca, even huachuma at higher doses and psilocybin at higher doses, that ego death experience does not feel blissful to me. It
Right.
feels awful. Actually, it feels deeply frightening,
Yeah.
because my um, ego structure has been so solid or been so rigid in certain ways to create the things that I've created in this life, not to keep me from spirit, but to be so sure of something that had never been before that I created it, right?
Yeah.
And so um, I really had to sit with being able to do that because, what if nothing comes through? What if, and you had said to me, if nothing comes through, it's fine.
Yeah.
But and so I felt like there was nothing to lose, but I also felt like you're going to see my camera go out in a minute, by the way, just because my camera's getting hot. That
Okay.
is not Jay. That's just my camera being hot. So for those
This
listening,
time. That's not him this time.
yes, I will be back on just in a few minutes, but you can still hear me, yeah?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. So I felt like, you know what? You need to go do this because you need the practice of doing it and you need to at least get your feet wet on doing it with intention rather than just by happenstance in a medicine experience or with somebody, a friend of yours that you're very close to,
Hmm.
just by chance. You need to fully come and surrender to this. And I also, it just felt like it was supposed to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Um, yeah, thank you for I've wondered about that for a long time because I knew I hit you with something, really big. And we had only met just at that other journey, that one journey previous. Chrys and I had met in February.
yeah,
And then this next journey that he agreed to come and channel
was
was
only like
in,
6 months later.
it was in August.
Yeah.
So I was like, he doesn't know me, he doesn't know Jay. Like I'm like, I hope that he feels safe. I just want him to feel okay. And Jay was pushing me so hard. It was really like the loudest message that I had gotten since we reconnected.
Yeah.
Um, and he wouldn't tell me what it was about. He just told me he wanted a chance to redo that last night and insisted that I try to get you there to be the channel. And so I didn't know what we were walking into that night, to be honest. And I really would have been okay because I didn't want to pressure you either, Chrys. Like I really would have been okay if
Yeah.
nothing else had come through, but instead it
Well, I
ended
knew
up being
something
this.
would come through. I was the astro medium at the time,
Right.
right? Like I
Yes.
knew I could translate or channel something. It was
Sure.
the idea of something coming fully into my body or taking over in that way
Mhm.
that I wasn't even more scared of. I just was like, am I going to be able to let that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I wasn't sure, like my fears going in were, am I going to be able to tell if it's Jay, when it's Jay? Because I figured it would be sort of in and out. And
Yeah.
it turned out that was, those fears were not even, not
Well,
even
I don't
necessary and not even valid. Like
I don't
yeah.
remember any of it except for the beginning by the water on a
Mhm.
dock. I do
Yes.
remember us sitting there.
Hmm.
Uh, and I do remember, um, I do remember being on a couch later that night
Hmm.
and being like, "What are we doing here?" I remember that, but
What
I
is
don't
happening?
remember anything else.
Oh, that's funny. Um, yeah, I've often wondered how much of that night you remember too. But once you invited Jay in, it was like your whole physicality changed, like your way of speech changed. Like I knew it was him. Like there was
Wow.
no
Even to this
question.
day, I can't even, I have no idea what that looked like. I don't know what happened. We've talked about it. I've obviously read the book, but from my
Mhm.
own memory perspective, it's just gone. It's not there.
That's wild. That really is. It was really difficult for me in some ways, to watch my beloved take over another body. Like it was really, I mean, it was awesome, but I mean, just the way he says things, and the way that like his speech like cadence and all of that, like it just
Yeah.
came right through you. And I got a lot of answers that night about what happened, the night that I lost him. Because there's like about 5 hours there that I was like, how did this happen? And so I got answers about that. I got answers about our relationship in general, and the purpose and the path that it moved me on to um, with my priestesshood. And I didn't fully understand at the time, right? Like he gave me enough, but he was like, what we were is not what we are, and it's absolutely not where we're going.
Yeah.
This was a necessary like step. And there was just so much like grief healing that night. Just things that I had been carrying that were weighing me down, and just like I couldn't seem to get my head above the water, that I was able to like let go of because of that. There was a lot of laughter. I mean, it was Jay is still Jay. I mean, he's exactly the same. Like nothing
Yeah.
has changed, to the point that I even tease him. I'm like, aren't you supposed to be an angel? like, like, why are you acting like that?
Yeah.
But the big thing that happened that night was that through you, he proposed to me.
Yeah.
Um, and told me that he intended to do that. And the last night that we were together, he almost did it then. And
Wow.
that's why he was wanting a redo so badly. And he also said that's why he wanted you there, because he knew if I heard it inside my own mind that I would doubt it from then on.
Right.
But that because it came through you, through someone else's mouth, that I would really like receive it and receive the validation of the relationship, because I never felt validated. I felt like this big, massive, beautiful thing happened and nobody knew about
Yeah.
it. um, and there were times when it almost didn't even feel real to me, like in retrospect,
Yeah.
because the grief was so bad too, which was also something that I had to carry alone. I couldn't
Yeah.
talk about that either. So it was this really beautiful healing that I didn't know that I needed.
Yeah.
I needed the reassurance and the validation that the love that I knew, like in the depth of my soul, was there and real, that he also felt that way. Right. And like,
Yes. I'm
um,
also hearing right now that you were grieving things that weren't lost, grieving the
yes.
idea that it wasn't real, that wasn't as, you were creating levels of grief for yourself that created walls between you and he that
Yeah.
were not necessary.
Yeah. I feel that, and I see that in retrospect. Um, Something interesting about the book, is that I didn't sit down and write that book after all of this was done.
Right.
I started writing that book when he and I got together. The scenes of like he and I, like in our relationship when he was in the physical, I wrote
Uh-huh.
before he died.
Wow.
Because I needed somewhere to
Yeah.
express it and lay it
Yeah.
down. And because I did that, I went back after he transitioned and would read it, and it would remind me that, yeah, like, yes, this was real. This happened,
Yeah.
because I wrote this like, fresh off of the experience, and like try to capture it the best that I could. And I'm so glad I did that. Sorry, it's gonna make me
Don't,
emotional.
please.
Yeah, I'm so glad I did that. But there was a point after the reconnection that I remember looking at the whole thing and just being like, am I just like crazy? Like, what is happening to me? What is my life?
Yeah.
that this huge thing happened, and then this huge like pit of despair, and then now there's this reconnection that I can't explain, and he's coming through other people. And yeah, there were walls there, that because I couldn't get a handle on it. I couldn't get a grasp,
Yes.
on
Yes.
what it was, the nature of it. Um, like in a broader sense, I guess. Like I knew what it meant to me, but um, but because I had felt so alone through the whole thing, it um, with that experience with you where you were channeling it, it really kind of brought it into this reality for me again.
Yeah.
Um, and I needed that. Like I needed that. I don't want to call it closure because it feels like an opening.
Yeah.
But there was something that happened through that with the validation and the recognition um, and just the love, right? And I'm going to say the consistency, the like, hey, see, this is still here. Nothing has changed
Yeah.
about the way that we feel about each other. The love that we knew was so unconditional and so unchangeable still is, even though it appears that everything changed. So yeah, it was so potent and so pivotal um, for me and Jay, as a soul together. That was the like moment where I was like, okay, this is so much bigger than I thought it was.
And deeper.
Yeah.
And so there were some things happened based on conversations that we've had before and that I've read in the book. There were things that happened during that channeling session that I don't remember.
I'm kind of glad, I'm not gonna lie.
and and also the person we were there with was not on board with some of that, yet I'm based on what I read it would still happened. And so I want to say we did not have intercourse or
No.
sex, but
uh,
there was sexual energy being exchanged through me. And I want to go into that because it takes me into, how beautiful that was and how okay that was, and the opening that created for you, and the remembrance. There was even a moment the next day that I do remember during the waking hours, daytime, after we woke up after breakfast, where you had asked me to come and lay with you in the bed. And I did feel like I was not being used by you all, but just like there. I was like totally holding you, but I knew what was happening.
yeah.
So I just was like, just very just present and almost like I was watching it from over here.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
watching this, you feeling him through me,
Mhm.
and I have had, and I just appreciate that because, I've had a client accuse me of sexually abusing them, a female,
Mhm.
okay, to hurt me. She didn't, none of that ever happened. It
Yeah.
was very twisty, archontic. It's what, it happens in the shamanic realm. Mind parasites, entities will get up in people
Right.
through their trauma and make them project things onto other people. And that happened. And I went through a process of questioning my own safety. Like, am I safe for
Mm.
people and for these women to be around, even though I'm not attracted to them and they know it? Like,
Right.
what would make someone even go there,
Yeah.
or try to accuse me of something like that? And so I completely sometimes forget about our experience together, but it even takes me into, that remembrance of how safe I can be as a practitioner or as an entity and as a
Right.
channel too. Just, when
Yes.
I'm in the medicine space, all of that really just turns off. Even
Yeah.
with attractive males who, I find men attractive. I It just turns off. I feel like a mommy crone. I feel like Uncle Sass. I just feel uh, like I'm a brother. I'm a sister. I'm your family. It goes away.
Yeah.
Any of that possibility. So, but there's nothing wrong with desire and sexuality, and
Mhm.
there's such a shame around it in the spiritual space and in the the whole world, there's sexual shame, but it even shows up with light workers and mystics and healers as well in their practice. And because even when we don't associate sexual shame with the church and the Bible, we then associate it with just a lower aspect of ourselves, something that's only there for survival, more primal. It's just like overeating. It's just a need rather than this sacred act that it can be and should be. So
Yes.
let's start with our experience together and go from there.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry that you felt a little bit used the next day, but
No, it
um,
felt, no, it didn't feel like I was
uh,
used in a bad way. It just felt like this is not my moment.
right, right, right,
Like
right.
I knew that you were
Uh,
wanting to feel him through me. And so I
yeah,
was just there.
yeah. I just wasn't quite ready to like let that go yet.
I
Like it
know,
had
I
been like
know.
such a magical evening. And I want to say it was very boundaried and appropriate.
Yeah.
And there was like checking in. And I don't know if you how much you remember about that, but there is no way that Jay and I can be in the same space and that sexual intensity not be there. Like
All
it
I remember from that night, other than waking up on a couch and being like, "What are we doing here?" I do remember that. Like, I remember suddenly, like, being like, "What are we doing in here?" I thought we were
like how did we get
outside.
here?
Um, is your breasts,
That's so funny.
and that's all he's talking about right now,
He's
and
still
that's
gonna.
all I can see. Not just your chest, and it's like a flash. It's like a
Yeah,
flash memory of
yeah.
there being something about your bosom.
Well, he kept showing you. He kept like to be clear to the listeners, no one was naked.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
there was not, but he kept showing Chrys like a lot of our like relationship and a lot of my body and a lot of his body too. But there it
Which
just
I
it
adore.
yeah. Like he's sexy. He's a sexy man.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, it was just there's no way to unstitch that. And that's honestly to me, that's when I was like, we're back. Like we're back. This is the first time I felt that like since because it doesn't matter if he and I were sitting in a library 4 tables apart from each other. That heat is there,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's the basis of our relationship. And that's not in a like you were just talking, like a lot of spiritual people look at as like a lower aspect, but it's not. It's the channel. It's that is the highway, the pathway, like straight into the spirit realm. And
Yeah,
we have spent lifetimes cultivating that between he and I.
yeah.
And it's so easy for me to slip into that. Like it takes nothing. Like I know that now, that's my realm. And it's because of him. Like he activated that in me, but it's lifetimes of practice,
Yeah.
of priestess and priesthood. And um I know he was showing you before we got on the call, Egypt. Like he that is something that we did in Egypt, and that he showed me multiple times that the reason why he is such a strong spiritual entity is we spent that lifetime together cultivating that energy and building his energetic body through sexual power. And that's why he's so loud and strong and can,
Yeah.
I mean, he can do a lot. I've seen him do things that are pretty incredible in this
Yeah.
realm.
Hmm.
um and people who don't even consider themselves like mediums or channels hear him.
Yeah.
And it's because of the charge of the sexual energy that we've cultivated.
Yeah. Well,
So
just very quick before we go further, I received an email today from a client, well, from a potential client, but someone inquiring about, saw me on a podcast where I was talking about Blue Lotus or Anti Lotus.
mhm.
And it's interesting that I would get that email today because not a lot of people inquire about that medicine,
Right.
or email me out of the blue, out of seeing a podcast of all the medicines. That was the one she was drawn to. And I
Hmm.
feel a message coming in for you right now that her energy and that medicine can help you connect. It was used by the Egyptians in their sex magic and priestess rituals.
Yeah.
So that is a medicine we would recommend mixing with your cacao, not during the day if you're going to drive,
Sure.
but to connect with him deeper, or to connect in this work. Her spirit, I hear you. Her spirit is really wanting to step forward for you in your work.
Beautiful.
Okay. So
Yes.
we just want to throw that out there. And
Yeah. Thank you.
anti-lotus is an incredible, beautiful medicine for psychic opening, and it does have an aphrodisiac effect. And
Mm.
but it also helps with Parkinson's disease. There's so many things that it can help with. But as this, um, you know, coming from such a religious background and so much repression, so much sexual shame, he really healed a lot of that within you. And then it felt like he healed it from the other side, or from the spiritual perspective. And I remember conversations that we've had, um, where you had yearned for him, and he would share with me certain things that you were not ready to hear at the time.
Mm.
Like, like at some point you would not feel him in the same way, or not hear him in the same way,
Mm-hmm.
because not that he was going to like go on to another realm, or go on to a higher level of heaven, but that he was you,
Right.
and that you still needed to hear him and see him and feel him as that other aspect that he
Mm-hmm.
incarnated as. But
Mm-hmm.
also, there's a crutch in that on a soul level,
Right.
because you were the one that chose to stay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny, the evolution of this, like it's just like layer and layer and layer and layer. Um, it's just interesting to me, like how it continues to morph. And I still, like, there are times when he is so embodied in me that I don't check in with him, or I don't, it's
Right.
moving in that direction. But like, I think when you initially told me that, I thought it was going to be a really abrupt thing, and there was this grief of like, I'm going to lose him again, like,
Right. Yeah.
which my soul,
which
like,
which I kept saying, like, you're not hearing me. Your Libra
right.
energy is not hearing me right now.
Well,
Like,
like,
they're
here was hearing
this.
you, but here was not,
Totally. Yeah, it was like I
yeah.
still need him to be an other for my human.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Especially that close to the trauma.
Yeah,
Like,
and also
it time wise.
this is an
Yeah.
important lesson for people to hear, that if the twin flames truly are the same soul, then
Mhm.
when one exits the physical body, or when you all are separated by some type of circumstance or distance, that it is your job to do the work on your own. Because spirit
Mhm.
came to me one time, and when I was hosting a medicine journey with someone who does have Libra sun, who was grieving a relationship with someone who was still alive but that was over, and that she just felt alone all the time, alone, alone, alone. And
Mhm.
they just kept showing me two words, and it said all one, all one, all one. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, well, maybe etymologically speaking, that's where alone comes from, is that you are
Mm.
all one,
Mhm.
that you are complete on the inside. And we as humans, through this density that we are immersed in this false matrix, but just in physicality, the illusion of separation is what causes the pain. It's the full embodiment of knowing there is no separation, which can take lifetimes to achieve. Let's be clear
Right.
about this, not one medicine journey, okay?
Yeah.
Like, it's lifetimes of working
Yeah.
your way into this
Mhm.
embodiment and this enlightenment
Yes.
around being one within yourself and complete, because your ego still kept saying, well, if I'm complete with myself, then that means I don't need him, and that he's gone, and I just need to accept it. And it was like, no,
Yeah.
it just, the
Yes.
heart
Yeah.
couldn't take it at the time, but
Yeah. It
even
was
now,
it was the time. Yeah. And I still have moments, it's fewer and farther between, but I feel like I have a much better understanding of that now, and
yeah,
in the way that spirit always does, like, it has moved at the pace that I was ready.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And there are times when I don't consciously like talk to him, like when we first like reconnected after the journey where he proposed. it never really dipped back down after that. Like I could hear him really, really well from then on. And I would just talk to him all the time about everything. It was just like he was just like with me all the time. And that has gotten less and less. And there's like weeks sometimes where we don't have a conversation. But then like last night I was watching a movie and I just felt him super strong and we just laughed and talked and then I didn't feel him again, but so
Yeah.
it's just weird. It's almost like he like pops out and then back in to me, right? And it's like, and I'm aware of what's happening now in a different way,
Yeah.
and I don't need that as much.
Yeah. Which is
Yeah,
beautiful. Other twin flames who are going through this need to hear that.
yeah,
That wholeness you felt with the person being separate from you being with you will come fully into your embodiment through time and through healing and
yeah.
through
When you're
stepping
ready,
into your soul mission.
right, right. Um, and I always know there was something that needed to happen there. Anytime I have felt afraid or alone, and I mean that in like a decision or something, right?
Yeah.
I know I could ask for him. Like I know I can. And he's not the only guy that I talk to, but I always reach out for him first because I
Yeah.
hear him the best. And the trust that was built there made me need that less because it was like, oh, when I come into this room or into this space, you're always here. Like you're always here and you're never not going to be here. And it kind of let me be okay with maybe not going in that room all the time
Yeah.
because I
Absolutely.
know that he's there. So and it's evolved, it's strengthened my relationship with my other guides the more I have like softened with that. And he was really funny for a long time. I would ask him things that were like, big things, and he would be like, babe, that's above my pay grade. Like
Yeah.
you need to be like reaching a little higher for your guidance. He was like, I'm the same entity as you. I'm the same
Right.
level. Like I don't
Right.
like you need to reach higher. And
Yeah.
so it forced me to grow and expand. And not that I don't appreciate that anymore, but it's not the crutch that I use now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, with your all's, it's interesting. Like, do you still feel attracted to women? If it's okay that I ask you that live here on air.
Live on air, coming to you. Alert the media. I that's been an interesting morphing too. Um, the short answer is no. Not
Wow.
in
Wow.
not yeah,
Because I
yeah,
can't imagine being attracted to, I'm not like, I'm gonna be with a male. At least
right.
that's where I'm at right now. But
Yeah,
I know that the male and female body and system is different in that regard.
right.
But wow, what a shift.
I know. And if you would have told me that for up until I was 36, I would have been like,
Yeah.
because I was so, I mean, like Jay was the first man that I was ever with physically. Like I
Wow.
never dated a man. I never like it was the first person I was with was a woman, and then I was married to a woman for 13 years. And
Wow.
but what I really think, like I've softened the way that I feel about that now too, because it makes a lot of sense to me in the work that I do. I had to be sexually intimate with women to learn how to move that energy
Yeah.
physically and how
Yeah.
to raise the sexual energy physically, right?
Yeah.
So now I am like well versed in both energies. And that would not have happened if I had not had intimate relationships with women prior.
Wow.
And because there's just things that I couldn't have known, right? But they're second nature to me now. So it's just easy. It's easy to pop in and out of both energy fields and like know what I'm working with and know what I'm doing and what I'm moving and what I'm like helping them cultivate for their own healing. So it served a huge purpose that was not the purpose that I thought that it was healing at the time. But yeah, I wouldn't say never. I'm never going to say never, right? And there might be a woman that comes along tomorrow that just knocks my socks off. But like as of right now,
Well,
it's
psychically, I have never seen you with a female,
yeah,
like going forward.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so I'm just saying it was interesting, and that's why I asked that because
yeah,
just beyond, the sexual, being coming from such a religious background and then coming out and being married to a woman and then
mhm,
the immense sexual connection that you had with your twin flame partner Jay,
Mhm.
and the experiences that you've even had spiritually around sex. I mean, it makes perfect sense because in your FM or false matrix chart or tropical chart, your rising sign is Scorpio,
Mhm.
which is the sign of, death and sex, and that the boundary of intimacy that can go beyond, the rock bottom, the shadow, the deepest place we can go in
Yep.
physicality before we must choose to resurrect after that and be reborn. And so, of
Mhm.
course, your work would take you into this at some point, as it is, your rising sign is the soul sign.
Mhm.
It's the one that really matters the most, in my opinion, to the whole chart and encases the whole chart. And so, take us into, the work that you do, and the sexual practices, and also Eros, because many
Mm.
people listening, you know, identify Eros as like the Roman equivalent of Cupid.
Right.
And the asteroid Eros, and the whole story of the love story of Eros, and the
Yes.
romance and the sex and the playfulness, and the more taboo sides of some of those myths as well. So
Mhm.
let's dive deeper, Scorpio rising. Let's go
All right.
deeper. Pun totally intended.
Yes.
And
Oh, we found it.
I nailed that one. That's what she said.
That's
Um, he goes, "That's what she said." He already knew what
uh-huh.
I was going to say before I said it. So let's
I
go
love it.
deeper into that and really open the space, and let's be playful. Let's be real. Let's be raw. No pun
Perfect.
intended. I know. I hear you.
He was like, that's what she said again. And he also told me this is about to be the biggest buzzkill at the worst time. But if I don't plug my computer in right now, it's going to die. So
Yep. Yep.
let's take a moment and
Yep.
I'll, yeah, okay.
Yep. No problem at all. So while she's doing that, I just want to say I'm so grateful for all the listeners who are tuning in and being able to hold this conversation, because even, us light workers, star seeds, mystics, awakened souls, we really feel like, sexuality is something that we're evolving out of, that it is the most unevolved part of us. And something that's really coming through from spirit right now is that our sexuality has been hijacked by the forces that be, by the false matrix and the mind control programming, by the uh, DNA mutation or genetic mutation that we've been under from certain beings. From other planets and star systems that have tinkered with us and mutated us in some way that we're now evolving and ascending our way out of, but that the sexual nature in us has been tapped into and siphoned and targeted because of how powerful it is and how sacred it is. So I know many people listening who feel like, abstinence is the way to go, or that sex should just be between you and your partner, and it should be healthy, and it should be tantric. And I just disagree with some of that. I think it can be nasty, it can be kinky, it can be fun. One of my practitioners, Krista Rose, she does a lot of sensuality and sexuality work, and she's very much immersed in the BDSM community and the kink community with her partner, and it's such a beautiful experience. They go to swingers parties, and they go to, I can't remember the name of those types of gatherings, but where you intentionally tie people up. And a lot of you listening might think, "Oh God, that's weird," or "That's not for me." And I'm just wanting you to push past any triggers and any resistance points you have to some of this, because kink, BDSM, um, dominance and submission. I'm letting Jen back in real quick. Um, these aspects of sexuality that feel very scorpionic and very taboo are often used in ways that are unhealthy. But as alchemists, us awakened souls, Jen, I was before. Can you hear me right now?
I can.
Um,
Can you hear me?
I was going on a tangent about sexuality and really talking about one of my practitioners, Krista Rose, who she and her partner go to kink parties and swingers parties, and it's a very spiritual and connective experience for
Mhm.
them. And she does a lot of sensuality work, like yourself, and sex priestess work, and really tapping into the people listening and wanting them to push past any resistance points they have to this and just be open,
Mhm.
like a flower unfurling. It's all very sexual, like in the medicine experience I had with that client years ago who accused me of touching her inappropriately, even though I asked to put my hand on her back. I asked for permission. I said, may I touch your thigh? Because I wanted her to spread her legs open because she was having sexual trauma come up. And there was all this floral energy. It kept showing me she needs to open up like a flower. And she was so there for it. And the inner child, the shadow entities can get in later in the process. And when you feel vulnerable, make up stories around that.
Mhm.
Um, because it was very vulnerable. It was probably the first time a man had ever safely touched her, and saw her in such a state that she had felt so much shame around. And so I think she also projected onto me because I am Chiron and I'm the wounded healer and all that. So I take it for what it is. But there's a stigma. Even, there's a new age religion happening on the planet right now. They've replaced the rosaries and Jesus candles with crystals and sage, and they have, a lot of us spiritual folk are aligned, but also there is a new age program that's happening where they are, ushering people out of these, now that we're figuring out, like, oh, the earth isn't 5,000 years old and or 12,000 years old, and I think there's life on other planets. These religions are dying off because they just don't make sense to us anymore. There's this new age religion to trap you in their trap as well. So we have to be very careful of all of that. But we're carrying this sexual stigma and shame from one religion to another, even in the
Mhm.
spiritual community. You have a lot of people, sex is just not safe. Sex has to be violent. Sex has to be aggressive, and aggressive is bad. There's just a huge conversation we can have around all of that. And in the work that you do, you're here to soften all of that and reclaim a lot of power. And also, I feel Eros has a lot to do with that. So I want you to go into that for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I did miss a little bit of what you're saying, of course, because my,
I
my computer
updated
died.
you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I'm
Um,
like, I was going to edit some of this out, but you know what? I'm going to let people
just
see just the raw beauty of technology
okay. It's all good.
and living in the matrix.
uh, Jay was screaming at me for about 5 minutes before that to get up and plug the computer in, and I just didn't listen. But
Oh,
it's all good. Yeah, I think there is, in general, not just recently, but there is this like idea that asceticism and like you know reining in the human desires and being the master and the control and suppressing that and squashing it down is like the way to enlightenment, and
right.
that's been through the ages, right? But it leaves
Doesn't that
out.
feel sort of patriarchal to you?
Oh, it's 100%.
I'm getting right now that actually for males, withholding semen, or choosing abstinence, or whatever word you want to use, being intentional about your sexual energy or mastering that
Yeah,
is different because it is different for us or for
yeah,
those in a male body, even if we identify as dual gender or gender queer, that
yes.
that male anatomy functions a little bit more differently, and it is a little bit more primal in certain ways.
It is, and for masculine body, it if you charge that energy without a release, it does just that. It charges your system, right?
Yeah,
Which is not
yeah,
to say that you never orgasm, but like being intentional about when it happens will
yeah.
actually like boost your vibration, charge your energy, like your vitality increases. So there is a lot to that. The exact opposite happens with women. We charge with orgasm. So the more orgasms that we have and more frequently, the more it charges our energy field and our vitality. So,
Well, I was gonna say I'm jealous, but you all have your periods every month, so I guess it
yeah,
evens out.
don't be jealous of that. Well, there's also like ways of using that energy that feel just as good as orgasm for a man. It's learning how to direct it and how to control
Yeah.
it.
And that's where
So
tantric practices can come in.
exactly. So it doesn't always have to be the release that's enjoyable. Instead, it becomes the whole experience is enjoyable instead of like the destination, right? Like we're only just
Yeah.
trying to get to the destination. And the Eros is really the key to all of that. That's what you're doing. You are building that energy, charging that experience, raising that, and it comes up through your chakras, just like your Kundalini channel, and it can connect you to the spirit realm quickly, which just puts you right in that realm of what ascetics are trying to reach by um, depriving themselves for 6 months on a mountaintop, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Right.
like, no, neither path is wrong. Which one do you want? Like, which one do you want to? And some people need that. They need to have the discipline, right? They need to
Yeah.
have the discipline and feel like they are active and in the process.
Yes.
Whereas Eros is a surrender. It's a different.
Mm.
It's a feminine path.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Please go
Yeah.
more into this and what Eros is all about. Because this is
Yeah.
new for me. I mean, I
Okay.
know that you're currently working on a book project in regard to this. So you can speak to that as well, but I'm very curious.
Yeah. This will be the the book that I thought I was writing is not the book that I am writing. It got hijacked and, by spirit, so it is going to be. I thought it was going to be, Jen and Jay part two. That is not the book. It is definitely Eros and the dark feminine, and Eros and grief, and the cracking open and the surrender. To me, Eros is surrender embodied. We The only thing that stands between us and union, and I say union, but I mean it in like the broader spiritual sense of like oneness, unconditional love. Like a lot of the Sufi poets refer to the divine as beloved, right?
Mm.
So it's that union of energy with the divine. So spirit cracks us open in different ways, but a lot of times it's because of our resistance, right? So we have like all of these things that are between us and union energy. And really, like, we work through them, we work on our healing, we push through. But a lot of times, what needs to happen is we just need to fucking take our fingers off of it
Yeah.
and just surrender and let
Yeah.
spirit move it like water
Yeah.
instead of like an arrow, and so you were talking about your friend Krista, who her and her partner go to like the kink parties and things like that. And I wanted to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a big stigma around kink and around dark sexual fantasy and
Yeah,
um,
which I've dealt with in my spiritual awakening process and in my life. I'm quite a fantasizer. And through porn addiction and through being, being part of the Pluto and Scorpio generation, all of us born between 1983 to 1995, Pluto in Scorpio, the FM8, so the false matrix Scorpio energy. We
mhm,
all have really been mastering on a soul level this, what sexuality and surrender is, but the shadow aspects of it as well. And it's showing up in our sexual nature where it needs to show up to be fully transmuted. But
mhm,
definitely it brought so much shame, and dark entities and false matrix programs, archons fed off of that
mhm.
shame. They didn't feed off the sexual fantasies, they fed off the shame that I felt from
Right,
them through the religious programming, through the belief of what is right and wrong, through, how can I be this spiritual guru? I'm using that as an exaggerative term,
right,
and have such a fantasy.
right.
Well, I shouldn't even call it a fantasy, but just a, you know, joy gives you dopamine, but so does shock and disgust.
Yeah,
Okay,
for
so
sure.
the human nature is quite complex.
It is. And the barrier to Eros are those walls of shame, those walls of resistance that come up.
Yeah.
And like a good way to break through those is sometimes engaging with kink or engaging with fantasy, with a partner who's safe or with spirit, right?
Yeah.
Letting it come up and moving through it. Like, all right, what does this look like? Here's this piece of me that maybe I'm not comfortable with at all, but like, what if we didn't send it into the corner to never look at again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Like,
had no choice in my process, it was
yeah.
like, especially when you get to the point where certain ones of those fantasies back in the day, that was all that would get you there,
Yeah.
especially if
Yes.
you're in a male body and you have an addiction to sex or, a porn addiction, that sort of thing. I'm over here like, is this video going to be taken down? You know what? I don't give a fuck. Um, so I just want to speak to that because it's something that's
Mhm.
happening to most people right now in the modern
Mhm.
world, and just this resistance to, I've had people in retreats of mine listen to Krista talk about kink parties and being tied up and being a little. Okay, do you know what that means in the BDSM community? A little.
I don't know if I that specific term.
So it's age play where she
Okay.
but yes, I don't mean to put her on Front Street, but just there's there's this idea of like I'm gonna play a younger
Gotcha.
role and you'll play the daddy role and that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
all of that turns me on, but I had shame around that back in
Right.
the day. What does
Yeah.
that mean about me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What did that mean when I was 7, 8 years old and I wanted to be with that grown man? And I'm
Right.
now having fantasies as an adult of being that 8-year old,
Mhm.
having acted on it or having the same fantasies that I did back then as an adult now. What does that mean about me? And
Mhm.
that's supposed to, what is, your ego gets in the way and programming gets in the way. And also just when I fully accepted it and let it all in, it got kind of scary for me, but also I broke through it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's your doorway, like allowing it to be. um One of my favorite authors has this great saying about fear, but I'm going to use it with about shame too. But like, shame is allowed to be in the car, it's just not allowed to drive.
Drive. That's right.
Yeah. So, pushing those kink boundaries in a safe way, right, where you're not harming yourself or someone else, allows the energy to be freed up, and it's a breakdown and then a breakthrough. Right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of fantasies that are dark, that society and culture would, or we think they would just be totally horrified if they knew.
I'm sorry
They're
to laugh.
trauma based. Yeah,
I've
no,
just
I
had
don't.
so many. I've cried in the middle of the night before, shaking with shame in my body over this, and then looking back, I'm just like, I'm so glad I'm where I'm at now with it, because Spirit has shown me many times, even in medicine journeys. I had a medicine journey where they made me act out something, and I thought this has to be dark. Something dark had to hijack this journey, and ayahuasca was like, no,
Yeah.
you're you doing this and not taking action on it, but also you doing this and forgiving yourself even in this moment is medicine.
Uh,
You doing this and not having taken action on it and seeing it from the person who has done it from their perspective. Because I know what, my first relationship, that karmic relationship in 2012. I'm gonna just keep it brief, but he told me at the end of our relationship, he's Scorpio sun, so he loved to sting me, okay? And he would not hurt anyone, but he did tell me that the only reason he was attracted to me is because I looked like I was 12.
mm,
That was at the end when he finally let me know about himself, and that was an aspect
mm,
of himself that even though he was a Satanist and all of that, that was not related to all of that. And it wasn't something he could help or control. And I felt really
mm,
badly for him for it. And, he would tell me during our relationship, um, not to shave my body and I didn't understand it during until the very end when that was happening. And
mm,
I really judged him hard for it for a long
mm,
time and really just grouped all the evil things that he was into and could be and grouped
mm,
that in with it as well. And so the first play I ever wrote, or excuse me, directed outside of high school was called Doubt, which is a play about two nuns who accuse a priest of sexual misconduct with one of the kids. And I I look back and I think, wow, some of that definitely showed up. I've had sexual fantasies of being in Egyptian temples and we're all doing this like ritual. I know these are past life memories. I know these
Mhm.
are that these are experiences I'm coming to rectify and transmute. But spirit doesn't tell you that during. It just feels like, wow, what if people knew how evil I actually am? You know,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
I'm having a sexual fantasy about someone passing away and absorbing their life force energy through my sex organs. Okay.
Mhm.
You know how the Egyptians, they like to transfer consciousness and stuff through sex. And
Mhm.
so I didn't know that during. No one, it wasn't like Yeshua came down and said, "Hey, brother, this is what's happening." It was just, I had to choose, Jen, to love myself before you continue. I had to make a
Yeah.
choice that not only was this spiritual in some way, and that me going through this was actually transmuting that theme on the planet. And that's not the only theme, but many themes on the planet.
Mhm.
Um, to transmute it through the sexual energy,
Mhm.
through pleasure. But also, I had to choose to love myself unconditionally
Mhm.
because it was either that or I was going to do it, to rid the world of the evil that I am. And then I realized, wow, how shamanic is this experience
Yeah.
that I'm going through, that I suffered through for
Mhm.
years of
Mhm.
it. And honestly, looking back, it was just the belief that it shouldn't be happening.
I was going to say that, isn't it
I never
interesting
had
that
a desire to
it's
break
the
into
overlay?
someone's house and tie them up, or someone break. I've had fantasies of, being tied up and a bunch of people breaking into the house. And I've talked to so many people, especially in my generation, that are like, "Oh my God, that one gets me there anytime." Like that's so
Yes.
commonplace. And I thought,
Mhm.
wow, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And that there's nothing wrong with us. We're all dealing with a false matrix hijacking of our sexuality and transmuting it by being in it, facing it, and then putting pleasure on it, and then letting it transmute, letting that lead turn to bronze and then silver and then gold. And there's an alchemy that's taking place. So I'm going to let you take over from here. But this really kind of brought something home for me as well.
I'm so glad. And yeah, you said that so beautifully. That's exactly the process. It is allowing and realizing that it's not really even that the act is always so bad. It's what we think other people would think about us if they knew, right?
Totally, totally. That
So
was that was me. Stellium and Leo here. I was like, what would the audience think if they knew?
yeah,
I was
exactly.
like Judy
But
Garland. I was like, what would they think if they knew I was drunk and on drugs right now? Okay.
yes, yeah, and we all have those things, and they show up, differently. But sexual energy in this culture, the way that we have all been raised and brought up and surrounded and steeped in it, is loaded, and it is stripping away all of these things that we are told are shameful or wrong about pleasure,
Yeah.
because pleasure is in the same vibration, joy, bliss, like that's all spirit realm, right? It is.
Yeah.
And we are one half human body and one half divine, right? And you can't just shut that off and ignore that. And if you stop that, which is what major religions often try to do, right? They separate, they take the body and they put it over here, and they're like, this is sinful and wrong and dirty, right? And you should aim here for spirit. But it's to keep us disconnected from the power of that pathway.
Yeah.
Because if you treat it as a pathway instead of something that is shameful, then it's direct access. Like we were given from the divine a way to access the divine through our vessel
Wow.
for a reason.
Let's
So it's
tune into something real quick. Is it possible? Let's ask spirit to come into the space. Is it possible that, this false matrix we're living in, the powers that be, the ill, ooh, meh, nah, T. I had to do that
well done.
for censorship purposes.
uh-huh.
Um, but is it possible that these, you know, elite bodies or entities have hijacked even our sexual energy and embedded these codes into us, and even down to, because they created the religions, the reptilians, created all of the religions, Hinduism,
Oh,
Islam, Christianity, Judaism, many more. These were all created by the same entities, which is why they all have the same symbology at the end of the day and the same
mhm.
ideals. Even Hinduism, which has reincarnation a part of their program. Why are we reincarnating not by choice, but through some type of dense karmic, which is Saturn? Saturn rules karma in astrology, and Saturn is Satan. So here we go with this the satanic energies that are here. This idea that even Satanism is there's something positive about it, where it says, "Give yourself totally to the flesh," and there's no shame around it. But then again, it's cutting you off again from something else because you're only focused on something. So
Right.
it's not.
It's capping the experience, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
it's still looping it in shame, right? It's still steeping it in shame,
yes.
right? Yeah.
Getting yes,
Give
like
yourself
being okay
over
with
to
the shame.
flesh, right? But that's all you then that's all you are. You're a body,
Yeah, totally.
fulfill the pleasure, fulfill the desire.
That's
Like
right.
there's a disconnect there still, right? And
Yes,
you're
yes.
all over it. And this is something I could talk about all day, but about the patriarchal systems and the religious systems and the organization that you named, like realizing realizing that the way to keep humanity small is to disconnect them from the inherent superpower that they have.
Yes,
and and how do we do that? We tell them that it's sinful, that it's wrong, it's dirty, it's shameful. Let's take away anything light about it. And I mean, walk into a party of people who aren't aren't walking a spiritual path. We'll just say that, right? If you bring up sex in general, it gets deeply uncomfortable in a hurry. Like they don't want to
totally.
talk about it, they can't hold it, they don't want to,
I'm going to the dark side again. It's just because my camera's getting hot. It's because things are heating up over
I
here.
know, right? We got some big time energy flowing, but and I'll take it one step further, just as something like we don't have time to go like deep dive in here, but if we talk about society and the world running on a patriarchal masculine, dark masculine, not divine masculine, dark
Totally.
masculine led structure. Creation happens in two ways, right? Like harvesting of energy. So we can create it through sexual energy, right? We can do that, and it can be divine, and it can be the most powerful and potent way that we have to expand and to tap into that. But when people are not willingly doing that for to serve what they want, the
Yeah.
agenda, right? How do they do it, right? Then you get into harvesting sexual energy from.
Yeah. Why do you think the whole global elite, all of them, the Vatican, the UN, all of the satanic organizations on this planet, Diddy, all of them, even
Yep.
the Hollywood puppets and
Mhm.
clones, why do you think they're all having sex magic rituals and there's tunnels everywhere and there's trafficking going on? Because it is so powerful. While you were plugging in your computer, I said, why do you think they're targeting our sexuality? Why do you think it was siphoned or um, targeted and being used to create addiction too? Because, it's so
Uh-huh.
pleasuring that the human
Yes.
organism can become addicted to that, just like food. Food is
Mhm.
nourishing, but I just, last night I was watching, another episode of 1,000 Pound Sisters. And, that's one of my shows I like to watch. And I'm just like, wow, how can the human body even get that large? Like, how can it withstand that? So,
Yeah.
here in this duality framework we're in, it can get very extreme, especially in the false matrix, because the pendulum swing from light to dark is so much more exaggerated in this false matrix 3D rather than just an organic 3D or especially 5D reality, which is unified. So,
Yes.
keep going, but
Yeah.
we're tapping into something really big here that
Yeah.
many people are not talking about. Also, because there's censorship. Who knows? This episode may be taken down. If you're listening to this episode in the future, I mean, we escaped by the seat of our pants or by the we barely made it through the crack, okay?
Yes. Under the
We
radar.
the algorithm just happened not to catch it, but
Yeah.
these types of conversations even spiritual people do not want to have because there's so much sexual healing that needs to take place, and it is one of the
Mhm.
most aggressed against. And so there's
Mhm.
so much deep trauma. Even when you open it up in your medicine journeys, it's like, okay, here's your grandmother's R word experience that she had, that is living in you that you now have to face. And it's just so, oh my gosh, as much pleasure as it can bring is how much pain it can bring too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And but it goes back to being willing to surrender it. I had a a sexual healing session with a sister, sex priestess of mine, and we actually did like a yoni and like cervical massage, and like the emotions that came up to the surface attached to memories that I had forgotten
Yeah.
blew my mind, but also took me out for like a week. You know, I just was like releasing, 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 and I didn't even know that that was under there, but I felt it shift my whole being with that release, right?
Yeah.
And I just kept saying as it was coming up, like, thank you, like, first, you know, you're no longer serving. I release this, you know, to be transmuted. And after that was over and my body came back to like a stability, um, the expansion and the lightness was absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, trauma that just, you know, is there until you're ready to sit with it. Right.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect that. Like what I thought was going to come up in that session is not what came up. And it's just really interesting what our bodies um, cling to. And it's like a little story that's being underwritten in our system. Right. And plant medicine will help a lot with that too. But
For
that's the
sure.
first like big somatic experience that I had, that it was the same kind of release, because I knew exactly like in the moment, because the things that came up I had forgotten about. Like it had been a long time, and I didn't really realize that that was still the program that was like running, right?
Yeah.
um, but then going back in after the clearing, right? And this can also happen with kink, right? Like you push the boundary where you're deeply uncomfortable
Yeah.
in a safe way, and it brings the thing up that is the resistance, that's the wall, right? And
Yeah.
then when you move through it like water, right, allowing, surrendering, releasing, it's the same, it's the expansion, right? It's what
Yeah.
comes after, but the willingness to surrender is the key. Like
Yeah.
all the way around, it's just like, okay, you know, this is here, and it is it this big scary evil thing, right, like that I've
Right.
built it into, or is it just a human thing? And sometimes it's not even my thing, right?
That's
Sometimes
right.
it's not even my thing. Just the willingness to sit with it like you do with anything that you're healing,
Yeah.
anything that you're working through, any trauma, just allowing it and sitting with it, and until it says everything it needs to say. And it may be loud for a while. And I know Jay and I did this with, because I
Yeah,
had a lot of,
he just put that idea into your mind.
yeah.
He just touched my head and he was like, "Get back to me. Like bring this back to me." And I was just about to bring it back to him. So
Yeah,
I think we got on the same wavelength
like
and how
moving.
he
Yeah.
showed up in that process as well.
Yeah. I had so much, not really body shame, but like, but sex shame, like just, which is so funny now because I'm like, nothing phases me now. But like when he and I got together, you know, it was all of this church upbringing of like women are, you know, subpar, you know, humans, and they're seductresses. And of course that came up because I was a mistress. Right, so it
Yeah,
was just
yeah,
all this like, oh, you're like the lowest of the low. Like this is, you know,
right.
and like stepping into my sexual power and finding my voice, like he was instrumental in that.
Yeah,
And it came from a safe mirror, right, who not only let me be me, but like coaxed it out, right? It was
yeah,
like, oh, there's more under there. Like come on, like there's
yeah,
more. And like conversations that would start with like, what's the darkest fantasy you've ever had? like, right? And then you want to act it out. You want to go there.
He has done that with me in spirit a few times.
Hmm. I'm
So
not
I do
surprised. That's
feel,
his medicine.
and he wants some credit for it. But he, um, there have definitely been times where he has, let's just say, helped me with that. And I'm just going to
Yeah.
leave it at that. But,
No, that's
you
well,
know,
that's, that's, I love that he does that. And that's his medicine, but it's also my medicine, right? Because we are the
yeah,
same entity, right?
totally.
So I get it. And I see what he's doing. And I actually like one of the things that I love about him in spirit is that he helps the people that I love. Like he
Yeah.
shows up in those kinds of ways to help them too. And a lot of times I don't find out about it until way later. And it makes me wonder, like, how much that I don't even find out about. But people will call and, like, Jay came to me last night and he helped me work through this thing. And I'm like, yeah. So, like, I love that he did that with you. Like,
Yeah.
that's, you know, like, there's nobody better for it. Like,
And
he's,
many of us have a soul contract with you all.
yeah, yes. So
So
it's definitely soul fam too. Like, just, yeah, soul
for
fam
sure.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Like there's just
Mhm.
been other connections in the past before. It wasn't like I was randomly chosen,
Of course. Yeah.
because at first it felt like that. Like a I'm glad I was here at this retreat, or I'm glad your friend invited you to come to that retreat. Wow, great. And not
What's that?
realizing like how deep it was going to get and how
Yeah.
complex and that
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
thing.
And I'm so grateful. I mean, it's like easy to look back now and be like, well, yeah, that was always going to happen. And like the depth of the friendship here, and like you're one of the few people that I can connect telepathically with, like in the physical. Like I like we
Yeah.
can talk, and I got it, and you got it, and we're good. Like,
Yeah.
and I love that. Like, there's such a deep appreciation there, and like I will always be um more grateful than you can ever imagine that you agreed to channel him that night. It really was the pivot point. And
Well, I'm going to say this on this podcast before we bring this to an end. I am actively opening my energy to a partner. And this is probably the first time in my whole life that I've wanted it for real and like wanted it or felt like it was going to happen or really am preparing myself energetically and sexually and even life wise, healing wise for something like that to occur. And I would absolutely love someone just like him.
mm-hmm.
And so I'm saying right here, right now, that if there's, what would you say to people listening around, maybe using their sexual power or their sexual energy and in the healing of that in manifesting a better relationship with their current partner, manifesting a relationship, using
Mm-hmm.
that magnetic power to bring something like that in.
Mm-hmm. um
And
the
I'm
first
listening very intently.
he's taking notes. The first thing that I would say is that if that desire exists in you, it is already yours. Like, that's, you won't come into this realm with that in you if it is not meant for you, right? So the trust, leaning into the trust that the desire was put there as a compass for the direction that you were meant to go.
Mhm.
And I would also say, and I think that I am qualified to speak on this, to be so open to what package or form or shape that arrives in.
Yeah, you are definitely, um, you know, I'm just going to say this right now so we can refer back to it. If I ever end up with a female, like we can just
Yeah,
say that
yeah.
the universe is a weird place, but
It
generally,
is.
if
I would have
I
said that too.
if I fall in love, when I fall in love with a divine masculine being, which I thought would never happen for me truly ever. Like I have planned my whole life for many years on never having that
Mm-hmm.
and not feeling even really badly about that. Um, Feeling like I don't really need it. So I don't, and you know what I mean?
Hmm.
It just feels like it feels very foreign to me because I am so good on my own. Sometimes in ways that don't serve me, like hyper independence and protecting myself, but really just very good on my own, and love being a lone wolf. And I'm not like other guys. My sexual energy is just different. I'm not one of these rabbits out here. So, I mean, but who knows what will awaken within me.
I was gonna say,
I've only
never say
had
never.
one actual relationship that lasted longer than 2 weeks before I had to say, you got to go,
Yeah.
you know, and that was the person from 2012. And it was the most terrifying, darkest, one of the most darkest. I got to watch that. The darkest experiences of my whole life.
Yeah.
So I just sort of, it got recorded in me, which I'm still healing from and have pretty much healed from that, which is why
Hmm.
this opening in me has even taken place. Is that even if I was to get hurt that badly again, it wouldn't take me that long to get over it. I have the tools in place, and also all of the things that he awakened in me, the sexual shame, the shame around being feminine, the shame, I mean, just all this darkness I've cleared, I've healed, I've moved
Yeah.
through. So
Yeah.
I thank him
Yeah.
for that deeply. And I thank Scorpio energy for
Yeah.
pissing me off so much. Um,
Which that also, and you know this about manifestation, but what that's done is put you in alignment with the thing that you really want, right? So that it
yeah,
can just like float right in because it's just a natural fit. Like that kind of energy isn't going to be aligned for you. That like
right.
karmic, all the things that you've healed from, right? Like
Yeah,
you're ready. It's that desire is there because you're there, you're ready. Like, so
yeah,
I just
yeah,
anchor into the energy of what you want, of that deeply unconditional love, and like trust that you're meant to go there or you wouldn't be feeling that way, and that it's already laid out, right? You're just
yeah.
magnetizing. Yeah.
I hear that and I receive that fully. I open my feminine energy to receive that fully, and
Beautiful.
am ready for that to I do already feel him, and sometimes I say to him, like, I know you can hear me, or I know, like, I wrote a song called Space and Time back in 2017, and I had a medicine journey with Wachuma last year, and Prince came in and had me play that song,
Mm,
and I could feel him,
yeah.
whoever he is, for the first time,
Yeah.
and felt like was someone there that I could almost reach out for, and realized that that song and the lyrics were about him and
Yeah.
was him singing to me, because there's a lyric in the song that's like uh wherever you are, just look up to the stars. I'll find a way, I'll find you there if you find me too. And
Mm.
it's like a cosmic connection, and I was just writing it to have a love song on the album, because trying to give it some diversity,
Uh-huh.
because that wasn't my forte. It didn't speak to me in that way at all. I had no idea.
Who's the romantic Libra now?
I know, it's gross, it's gross. Okay, well, I just really appreciate you being here and
Oh,
for
thank
sharing
you.
so much of yourself with all of us, and being brave and pushing through your Scorpio rising boundaries and barriers
Shell.
to, yeah, to let us into all of that. And I just really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you wish to share with the audience, or anything that's on your heart that you want to let come through?
Oh, just that for the people who are in the deepest, darkest hole, like I was for a year, I would just love for this story and this priestess energy to be a testament that we never know what is coming on the other side of that.
Yeah.
So don't give up. Like you've not forgotten. Spirit's not forgotten about you. You're not alone. And the most beautiful thing can come out of that. And I know that sounds, but I follow listen to this whole thing, you realize that I really mean that. Like I was done. And so I just want to offer that. Just hang in, hang in, and trust that like there's more than you could ever imagine on
Yeah.
the other side of that.
Thank you so much for that medicine, Jen. And to that point, I want to say the darkest lights cast, or yeah, the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. And the darkest parts of our lives in those chapters were the most pivotal and transformative, just like for the caterpillar before it becomes the butterfly. There's something very alchemical and sexual and sensual and magical that happens in the chrysalis and in the dark
Mm-hmm.
places and in the decoagulation and the reforming of the new. And, for anyone listening, let sex into your life. Let it in, even if it doesn't feel sacred to you, because there may be something sacred through your experience of it that is happening in the collective. Because there is such a thing as sexual empaths that help transmute that energy on the planet and through other people, and also to there's a line that my mom used to tell me when I was younger, and I would scoff at it because she would always say, "Christopher, why does life have to be a roller coaster? Why can't it just be an even line like this? Why can't you ride the
Mm-hmm.
middle?" And I'm like, that doesn't sound fun. And I know what she meant, and it's,
Yeah.
every time you go on these high highs, there's going to be lows that match it, and that
Mm-hmm.
there's a piece in the middle of that. She also used to say to me, when I would, around relationships and that sort of thing, she used to say, "It's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all." And I would say, that sounds horrible. It does.
Mm-hmm.
I don't wish your experience upon me. I don't desire to become a sex priestess and magical light worker through the portal of losing my twin flame and the grief
Yeah.
that comes with that. There's no desire I have that's not goals to me. However,
I didn't
I
either.
I know, I know.
Uh,
And
if you laid out all the options, that not would not have been the one that I like ticked off.
totally,
So
totally.
yeah.
And so it's that which we wouldn't choose, which has the greatest medicine always. Like when people come to my retreats and they're like, "Can I work with Auntie Lotus tonight?" And I'm like, "You know which medicine's calling you." And they're like,
Right. You
"Please
already know.
don't say the mushrooms.
Like
Like, please don't
sidestep.
say iboga."
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, "Yep."
Mm-hmm.
So also, I wouldn't have chosen the path that I have been on.
Yeah.
In a million years would I have chosen it in the dark places it has taken me. So for anyone who wants to work with Jen, you can go to themelodyofmissjen.com or check out her work on jenfields.substack.com. Also, go ahead and head over to Amazon and order The Melody of Fire. I'm even featured in this book, and I have to say that because it's just such an honor and
Oh.
just such a pleasure to have been a part of this incredible story, because I remember even just seeing the original like prototypes of the cover of this and just being a part of the birthing and the conception, or the conception and the birthing and the raising of this incredible child and this data bank of medicine that has come into the world. So everyone check that out. And if you would like to connect with me, you can go to chrisking.com, medicinealchemist.com, and ascended-astrology.com. Thank you again, Jen, for being here. And thank you all for witnessing us, holding space for such an incredibly deep conversation. And because we definitely got deep, and and we invite you to share your thoughts, insights, and revelations in the comments below, and everything that we
Absolutely.
mentioned will also be in the show notes below. We'll see you all next time on Ascend the Matrix podcast. Have a good day.